Herman Walter Hodges was born on October the 2nd, 1899 in Denison, Texas. He died on February the 14th, 1984 in Crescent, which is in Hood, Texas. He's buried at Mount Olive Cemetery. His father was Harvey Bryant Hodges. His mother was Viney Leora Fulbright, and he was one of 13 kids.
This is Wiley Hodges, his son. My dad, Herman Hodges, he was a hard worker. We had he had a life of near Watauga, Texas, with the family. He went to Watauga School, and my mother, he met my mother, Virginia Irene Faulkner, and they later married after school. And he then became a sharecropper of Virginia Irene's granddad, Wiley W. Potts, near west of Watauga. And on this sharecrop of the farm, he raised cotton, corn, and everything. He had dairy, those cows that he milked daily, that was made, milk was separated, made butter, and etc. like that. We had a lot of food canned. We had water, but no electricity. It was a very primitive type of living, but my mother and them made a good home. He, during the Depression time, it was very hard. And his mother had 4 children. He had 4 children and a set of twins, one of them a set of twins. And when mother died, she had 29, the Depression forced my dad to have to liquidate the farm, to find a job in town. And my brother and I, 2 brothers and I, moved to my grandmother Faulkner, John Rayford, and grandmother Faulkner, okay. We lived there for 18 months till my daddy got a home rented in North Fort Worth and got his job working on the stock show rodeo building, Will Rogers Coliseum, to get a job. And then while we were living there with our grandmother, one of the twins, Teddy Hodges, took a spinal meningitis and immediately died. So that left me, Wiley R. Hodges, and my little brother, Eddie Dwayne Hodges. And so this was a bad part of the life. He losing his wife and then farm, moving to his mother-in-law's, grandmother Faulkner's, and losing the child. But he did find the job in town, and he came and took us to a rented house on the north side. And from time to time, and while I was in the north side, he worked at the building the Will Rogers Coliseum. We went to Rosemont School and just lived on the north side as kids. And my brother was 7 years younger than me, but he always had some kind of a lady that kind of lived and worked and helped take care of us, and had several different ones over the years. He'd moved from here to there, and he rented a farm out near Herman, 80 acres. And then we lived out there, and Dad took care of his 2 boys, and then did the best he could. He had a truck he hauled all over the country from various things, and always walked to the rodeo out there every year and different things for the city. I married then in December '43, and he had been going with this lady who lived with her aunt, had a dairy farm near there, and my dad would haul feed for their dairy, and he became acquainted with a Margaret Key. Margaret Key was a descendant of the Francis Scott Key. And so they married then soon after, 2 weeks after I married and moved out of the house, and they lived together till she passed away. But they then, prior to that, he had a lady that we moved to Fort Worth, kept the farm, moved to Fort Worth, and they opened a little cafe and grocery on Riverside Drive in Fort Worth near what used to be a Busey lumber mill. And they ran it there, lived in the back, my brother Eddie and I, and they lived in the back in our living quarters for probably a year and a half. And that didn't work out, so she left, and my dad, we went back to the farm. And we just continued working hard, and he did the best he could, and hauled and various things. And then when I married in December '43, he'd been going with this lady, like I said, and they married. And in the meantime, then they started this store south of Everman, Hodges Grocery. Started out, it was a little fruit stand and selling the cantaloupes and watermelons out of the back of the truck. He later made a deal with the landowner to build a little building, and they expanded over the years and had a meat market and a lot of vegetables primarily. You go to Colorado and bring in Christmas trees, anything to make a buck out of. Still worked with the city out there and the stock shows and various things. And then about that time, my brother Eddie married, and he moved out, so it was just my dad and Margaret, and they ran the store for a number of years, and then they retired in the 60s to 70s and moved out on. My brother Eddie Hodges had a liquor store out on 377 west of Benbrook, but he had a house in the back of it, and so my dad and Margaret moved out there for a while, a number of years, and then moved to. Then they bought a little house out at Crescent, Texas, and they moved out there, and he lived the rest of his life several years. Margaret and him did, and he always had a little garden out there. And his knees were so bad and eat up with arthritis that he had to get down and crawl and have a short hoe to do his garden work. And he went fishing down anytime. He loved fishing. I would go with him occasionally, or he'd come to my place at Cedar Creek Lake and fish off my dock. And then but he still lives. He still did his flowers in the house and etc. But anyway, Margaret passed away, and his legs had so much bad arthritis, and it was so he was just terrible, and he was very depressed and missed Margaret. So he then, at later, they took his life in February after Valentine's Day.